Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Part 2, Chapter 13. For the first time, Levin left off his shuba and clad more lightly. Shod in his heavy boots, he went out, tramping through the brooklets as they glanced in the sun, and stepping, now on a cake of ice and now in deep mud. Spring is the epoch of plans and projects. Levin, as he went out, was not decided upon what he would first take in hand, any more than the tree knows how and why the young sprouts push out, and the young branches clothe themselves with buds. But he felt that he was going to originate the most charming projects and the most sensible plans. He went first to see his cattle. The cows were let out into the yard and were warming themselves in the sun, lowing as if to beg permission to go out to pasture. Levin knew them all, even to the least. He examined them with satisfaction, and gave orders to the enraptured cowboy to take them to pasture, and to let out the calves. The milkmaids, gathering up their petticoats, and leaping into the mud with bare feet, white as yet, and free from tan, chased the frisky calves around, and with dry sticks kept them from escaping from the yard. The yearlings were uncommonly beautiful. The oldest had already reached the size of ordinary cows, and Pava's daughter, 3 months old, was as big as a yearling. Levin admired them, and ordered their troughs to be brought out, and their food to be given them in a reshotki. He found, however, that these reshotkis, or portable palisades, which had been made in the autumn, were out of repair because they had not been needed. He had the carpenter sent for, who was supposed to be busy repairing the threshing machine, but he was not there. He was repairing the plows, which should have been done during Lent. Levin was very indignant. Oh, this everlasting procrastination, against which he had so long struggled in vain. The reshotki, as soon as learned, not having been in use during the winter, had been carried to the stable, where they were of light construction. They had been broken. As to the plows and harrows, which should have been put in order during the winter months, and he had hired 3 carpenters, nothing at all was in proper condition. Levin summoned the prikishchik. Then, angry at the delay, he himself went in search of him. The prikishchik, as radiant as the whole universe, came at his master's call, dressed in a light lambskin tulupchika, twisting a straw between his fingers. "Why isn't the carpenter at work on the threshing machine? Da, this is what I wanted to tell you, Konstantin Dmitrich. The plows had to be repaired. We've got to plow. Da, what have you been doing this winter? Da, what do you have such a carpenter? Where are the reshotkis for the calves? I ordered them to be put in place. You can't do anything with such people," replied the prikishchik, making his hands a gesture of despair. "It's not these people, but this prikishchik, with whom nothing can be done," said Levin, getting still more angry. "What do we pay you for?" he shouted, but recollecting that shouts did not do any good, he stopped and contented himself with a sigh. "No, you can get the seed in yet?" he demanded after a moment of silence. "Back of Turkino we could tomorrow, or a day after. And the clover? I sent Vasily and Mishka to sow it, but I don't know whether they succeeded. The ground isn't thawed out yet." "Oh, how many desyatins?" 6. "Why not the whole?" cried Levin angrily. He was furious to learn that instead of sowing down 24 desyatins, they had only planted 6. He knew by his own experience, as well as by theory, the needs of sowing the clover seed as early as possible after the snow was gone, and it was never done. Not enough people. What can you do with these men? The 3 hired men did not come, and then Simon. No, you had better have taken them away from the straw. Da, I did that very thing. Where are all the people? There are 5 at the compote. 4 are moving the oats so that they should not spoil, Konstantin Dmitrich. Levin knew very well that these words, "so that it should not spoil," meant that his English oats, save for seed, were already ruined. Again, they had disobeyed his orders. "Da, did I not tell you during Lent to put in the ventilating chimneys?" he cried. "Don't you be troubled. We will do all in good time." Levin, furious, made a gesture of dissatisfaction and went to examine his oats in the granary. Then he went to the stables. The oats were not yet spoiled, but the workmen were stirring them up with shovels instead of simply letting it down from one story to the other. Levin took away 2 hands to send to the clover field. Little by little his spirit calmed down in regard to his prikishchik. It was such a lovely day that one could not keep angry. "Ignat," he cried to his coachman, who, with upturned sleeves, was washing the carriage near the pump, "saddle me a horse." "Which one?" "Oh, Kolpik. I will obey." While the saddle was being adjusted, Levin called the prikishchik, who was busying himself in his vicinity, hoping to be restored to favor. He spoke with him about the work that he wanted done during the spring and about his plans for carrying on the estate. He wanted the compost spread as soon as possible so as to have his work done before the first mowing. Then he wanted the furthest field plowed so that it might be left fallow. All the fields, not half of them, should be attended with the laborers. The prikishchik listened attentively, doing his best evidently to approve of his master's plans, but his face was so long and melancholy that he always seemed to say, "This is all very well and good, but as God shall give." This tone vexed and almost discouraged Levin, but it was common to all the prikishchiks that had ever been in his service. They all received his projects with a dejected air, and so he made up his mind not to get vexed about it, and he did his best to struggle against this unhappy "as God shall give," which he looked upon as a sort of elementary obstacle fated to oppose him everywhere. "If we have time, Konstantin Dmitrich." "Why shall we not have time? We shall have to hire 15 more workmen, but we can't get them. One came today who asked 70 rubles for the summer." Levin did not speak. Always the same stumbling block. He knew that however he might exert himself, he never could hire more than 37 or 38 laborers at a reasonable price. Once or twice he had succeeded in getting 40, never more. But he wanted to try it again. "Send to Suri and Chefirovka. If they don't come, we must go for them." "I'm going to go," said Vasily Fedorovitch gloomily. "Da vot, the horses are very feeble." "Buy some more, da, but I know," he added with a laugh, "that you will do as little and as badly as you can. However, I warn you that I will not let you do as you please this year. I shall take the reins in my own hands." "Da, but you sleep too much, it seems to me. We are very happy to be under our master's eyes. Now have the clover put in on the Berezov land, and I shall come myself to inspect it," said he, mounting his little horse Kolpik, which the coachman brought up. "Don't go across the brooks, Konstantin Dmitrich," cried the coachman. "No, by the woods." And on his little, easy-going ambler, which whinnied as it came to the pools, and which pulled on the bridle in the joy of quitting the stable, Levin rode out of the muddy courtyard and picked his way across the open fields. The joyous feeling that he had experienced at the house and the barnyard increased all the time. The loping of his excellent gentle ambler swung his body gently to and fro. He drank in great draughts of warm air, slightly freshened by the chill of snow which still lay on the ground in spots. Every one of his trees, with greening moss and buds ready to burst, filled his heart with pleasure. As he came out on the enormous stretch of the fields, they seemed like an immense carpet of velvet, where there was not a bare spot or a marsh, but here and there patches of snow. And the sight of a peasant's mare and colt treading down his fields did not anger him, but he ordered a passing mushik to drive them out. With the same gentleness he received the sarcastic and impudent answer of a peasant. He said, "Ipat, shall we put in the seed before very long?" And Ipat replied, "I must plow first, Konstantin Dmitrich." The farther he went, the more his good humor increased, and the more his plans for improving his estate developed, each seeming to surpass the other in wisdom. To protect the fields in the south by lines of trees, which would keep the snow from staying too long. To divide his arable fields into 9 parts, 6 of which should be well dressed, and the other 3 devoted to fodder. To build a cow yard in the furthest corner of the estate, and have a pond dug. To have portable enclosures for the cattle so as to utilize the manure, and thus to cultivate 300 desyatins of wheat, 100 desyatins of potatoes, and 150 of clover, without exhausting the soil. Full of these reflections, he picked his way carefully along so as not to harm his fields. He at last reached the place where the laborers were sowing the clover. The teljega, loaded with seed, instead of being hauled on the road, had been driven out into the middle of the field, leaving heavy wheel tracks over his winter wheat, which the horse was tramping down with his feet. The two laborers sitting by the roadside were smoking their pipes. The clover seed, instead of having been sifted, was thrown into the teljega, mixed with hard and dried lumps of dirt. Seeing the master coming, the laborer Vasily started towards the teljega, and Mishka began to sow. This was all wrong, but Levin rarely got angry with his muzhiks. When he reached Vasily, he ordered him to take the horse out of the teljega and lead him to the roadside. "It won't do any harm, sir. It'll spring up again." "Obey me without discussing," replied Levin. "I will obey," said Vasily, taking the horse by the head. "What splendid seed, Konstantin Dmitrich," he added to regain favor. "I never saw any better, but it is slow work. The soil's so heavy that you seem to drag a pud on each foot." "Why wasn't the field harrowed?" demanded Levin. "Oh, it'll come out all right," replied Vasily, taking up a handful of seed and rubbing it between his fingers. It was not Vasily's fault, but the field had not been harrowed or the seed sifted, but Levin was not less provoked. He dismounted, and taking the seed cod from Vasily, began to sow the clover. "Where did you stop?" Vasily touched the spot with his foot, and Levin went on with the work as best he could. But it was as hard as wading through a marsh, and after a little he stopped all in a sweat and returned the seed cod to the muzhik. "No, barin, I don't like to do slack work," said Vasily in his muzhik dialect. "What is good for the master is good for us, and look yonder at that field. The sight of it delights my heart. It is a fine spring. Da, it's such a spring as our forebears never saw. I was at our village, and our storik has already put in his Turkish wheat, and he says he can hardly tell it from rye." "But how long have you been sowing Turkish wheat?" "It was you yourself who taught us how to sow it. You gave us 2 measures last year." "No, look here," said Levin as he started to mount his ambler. "Look at Mishka, and if the seed comes up well, you shall have 50 kopecks of desyatin." "We thank you humbly. We should be content even without that." Levin mounted his horse and rode off to visit his last year's clover field, and then to the field which was already plowed, ready for the summer wheat. Levin rode back by way of the brooks, hoping to find the water lower. In fact, he found that he could get across, and as he waded through, he scared up a couple of wild ducks. There ought to be a snipe, he thought, and a forester whom he met on his way to the house confirmed his supposition. He immediately spurred up his horse so as to get back in time for dinner and to prepare his gun for the evening.